So the fireside chat is going to be with Rania and Rahul Paul, and we're going to talk about the future of digital.
I want to start you by asking the question, what is the future of digital? And can you tell us a little bit more about the major trends that are shaping the world of business, please?
So digital as a term, I think almost everybody would have heard of it, would have had its various version of what they understand by digital. So I would say that from a point of view of what are the digital trends and is digital out here, this has already been out here for quite some time. It has been in our smartphones, as I can see. Digital has been a part of what we have been doing in terms of how we're buying, how we're living today. It's a part of our lifestyle. So digital quite has been there for the last decade, and I think the biggest reason for it is in our hands, which is the devices that we're carrying. Coupled with the fact that there is availability of internet connections, which makes it possible for all of us to have a different window to the world. Earlier, we used to have a window which was quite physical, and now we have a window which is quite driven by mobile. And a combination of a mobile interface with a physical environment and people is what is digital all about. Now, as we are moving on the whole digital journey, I would say that the major trends which are reshaping the market, the first and the most important thing is what is happening in the whole area of big data and analytics. This is a humongous amount of data which is getting generated today. And as you have been talking about the cloud in the earlier discussion, cloud by itself generates so much data. And all this data, so in fact, this year we are going to generate close to around 40 terabytes of data, which is whatever we have generated in the last 2 years is equal to what we have generated in the last I think eons of our humanity in terms of the just size of data. So I would say that we are in the middle of a data revolution which will reshape the way we look at digital, and let me connect it to the other two trends which are there. The other important trend is about artificial intelligence, and I would say that from an AI point of view, the amount of things which are happening today, what IBM is doing around its WiSTEM project, what is happening around Siri, what other AI bots are doing. There are self-learning bots which are becoming smarter and smarter by the day. And these smart bots are reshaping the way in which services and customers are required today. And if you look at, there is a theory which has been put up by the Singularity Institute in US. It is chilling kind of presumption that by 2025, one machine will, or one bot, will have the whole intelligence of the whole human race. So one bot will become as powerful as the whole human race. So that has a huge implication of how we buy in the digital world, and already we are seeing, and there was an earlier discussion which was happening about job losses happening, and you also talked about the job losses happening because of the fact that lower order jobs are getting more and more automated. Why are they getting automated? Automated because there are more smarter bots which are able to take up those jobs. So these two, and the third and the most important thing which is there is in terms of what is happening around dematerialization of things. So the 3D printing is coming, and in a way, you are doing a lot of stuff. That's what we figured out around the 3D printing, design, etc. So that is the third element of it. Internet of Things is the fourth element of it. And I think Internet of Things, why it is crucial is the fact that while you have devices, and devices have lived for the last few years, they're now living together. And the connected devices this year would be close to around 25 billion connected devices. That is what we will have as a number this year itself. Which is, just 2 years back, was close to around 8 billion. And in 1995, we had just 1 billion connected devices. So digital per se encompasses all these four aspects and encompasses in the way which businesses run, in which people behave, and in which governments run or societies run. So it's much larger from that point of view.
So now if we want to talk about the challenges, what do you think, or what can you share with us in terms of the major challenges that businesses are faced with while they are trying to move to digital and create digital products and services?
I would say that, and again, there was a lot of discussion which happened around cybersecurity. I guess that the amount of data that we're throwing out onto the cloud, the amount of data that we're throwing out into the various amounts of machines that are out there, in the things which are there, the things most of the time are not secure. And there is a possibility that tomorrow somebody might just hack into your car and stop its braking system. That's quite possible today. There are people who are doing it. So
that actually happened to me using the Get Around app. If you are familiar with Get Around, look it up, learn about it. It's actually a really fascinating application that is widely used in San Francisco. It's expanding to other cities around the States as well. But my car got hacked using this app.
yeah. So earlier when you had the hard tool to hack a particular device, that's no longer the whole thing. Right now, you can remotely also hack a particular device because of the fact that the device has a sensor, and that sensor provides has most of the time a receiver as well as a transmitter to get information and to provide an information. So what you are having is an access point for hackers to hack it. So I would say security per se, and it transcends beyond cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is one aspect of it where enterprises get concerned, people get concerned, but I'm more concerned with what is happening around the devices. And actually it is the explosion of devices or things that we have is completely uncontrolled right now. And nobody is looking at it then from a point of view of what happens if. And the other aspect, as I was talking about, is a kind of science fiction kind of a thing. And again, that was a thing that we discussed last time. What happens to so many people? I would say today in the technology industry, 30% of the jobs is going to be redundant in the next 5 to 10 years. And when we're talking about technology sector having so much redundancy, the redundancies in other sectors will be even higher. This is a real issue that will face us in the digital world, wherein we have this ethical question of whether to keep a job versus keep a bot. And I guess we have not started answering those questions. There are some of these questions are being answered in the way that these questions are being answered in the value. These questions being asked. I would say Stephen Hawking is a great proponent of the fact that we are moving towards a doomsday. We are, in a way, and the fact is that tomorrow a lot of the jobs, if they go, there will be social upheaval. What do these people do? There are around 7.5 billion people in this world. So that is the other aspect of it where we stop. And then the aspects which is much more to do with how do you interact with customers, and from a customer interaction standpoint, there are a lot of changes which are coming through, and there are very rapid changes. And I would say businesses today are not ready themselves for those changes, and we need to get ready for those changes. And, yeah.
So moving to customer interaction, can you tell us about, in terms of digital customer acquisition, for example, what are the major trends in this area?
Yeah, so I would say that traditionally marketers have always looked at customer in different silos and not as a journey. And I see businesses need to look at customers from a journey standpoint, and that's where companies like yourself come into picture in a sense, looking at design-centric thinking rather than looking at thinking which is siloed from grounds up, where design is separate, your go-to-market is separate, and how a customer interacts from a service standpoint is quite different. So what we have to look at when we design the product grounds up, and maybe you can also share some thoughts on that, is the fact that how do we design the products differently, wherein we are thinking about the service when we are designing the product for consumption. The second aspect which is there is that the customer journeys have to be far more mobile in nature. We are today also building applications which are built for the desktop, whereas the world is completely moved to mobile. 80% of all the digital marketing revenues for Facebook come from mobile. That's a data point by itself, and Facebook does a lot of revenue out of digital marketing. Google, 50% of all the traffic which is search related is coming from search engine on the mobile device. The interesting thing which is happening, and which they have just announced last week, is that Google is going to split the algorithms for computing search ranks separately for mobile versus for desktop. This is an important news which has just got unnoticed totally, because there is a recognition by even Google that the mobile economy is more important than the desktop economy. Digitally, already media sales per se have outstripped the sales of the traditional media. Traditional media houses are either shutting down or converting themselves into media houses. So I would say that is a big opportunity which we need to relook at and design products for a different UI and UX, and design people for different people. It's the millennials who are buying. It's not people like us. And I would say I am far away from millennials, but still, not to give away my age, but still I would say that there is a big shift which is there.
Absolutely, that demographics is definitely a huge factor, but back to what you mentioned earlier, when it comes to design-centric products and services, I think that before and until Apple came into play and actually brought this to the surface, there was still a huge gap in the way services were being built and provided versus how physical products were also being created and marketed to consumers. And with the merging between both, you have the software and the hardware part coming together, especially when we're talking about devices and more integrated systems. It becomes about a hybrid kind of experience where you're not only experiencing the physical products from a mechanical standpoint or only an ergonomic standpoint, but now you're experiencing the product also from an experiential standpoint that tackles other senses, which is how you interact with your device visually, how you intrinsically and intuitively navigate. So again, that goes back to the UI and UX part of design.
Absolutely, I would completely agree with you. The UI and UX couldn't be more important today than ever in the history of how marketers have interacted with products. And I come back to marketing because while digital is much larger in marketing, marketing is an important component of it. And I would say digital acquisition always is the first thing which starts. So I would say that marketing led the revolution towards digital, while the benefits of digital will come across when you implement it across product, when you implement it across supply chain, when you implement it across operations. So that is where a lot of, I would say, innovation will come in, but marketing always started. The second element which I would like to bring up is the element of using artificial intelligence for customer service. You are looking at the textual UI, which you would have worked with the clients with, wherein I am not looking at a UI from a standpoint of a static piece of a customer. I'm looking at constantly evolving the UI based on the kind of persona of the customer, which is quite critical and which makes the customer engagement very high. As somebody who looks at digital very closely, the amount of challenges that a digital marketer or digital sales person has today is far more than what we ever had in the past. The UX has become better, but the acquisition has become difficult. Can anybody tell me why?
I'm not going to say anything. Your turn.
Sure. So what the question was, and this is to get back the room into a little bit of action, is that the UXs have become better, the interfaces have become better, the offers have become better, but the acquisition has become more expensive, which is the customer acquisition. Why is it so? Sorry.
Because it's a very overcrowded space. So there is just your interface is pretty much as big as this, and there's just so much that you can fit into this. So even and while every company is trying to sort of be visible in this small space, right? So it is difficult for you to find that visibility with the consumer.
Lovely. I know that you're a digital entrepreneur, so you knew the answer.
I usually struggle with that.
So what happens is that today we have close to around 1,000 branded messages hitting us every day. 1,000 ads without you even knowing that there are 1,000 ads hitting you. You actually read around 1,000 ads. Do you make a purchase decision? So imagine you just backtrack around 2 years back. The number of messages which used to come to us was close to around 200. So the chances of buying were 5 times more a couple of years back than they are today. So brands are vying for that space and vying to ensure that they are visible enough. So unless the mapping of the customer journey happens from start to end, it's very tough. It's very tough for brands to survive.
Now that we're talking about that aspect of growing with businesses and talking about growth, what is your advice for companies on what to do and what not to do while they're trying to build a digital marketing strategy, and how that is different at different growth stages of the business?
Yeah, I'd say that the good thing about digital is, again, like cloud, is the fact that you can turn it on and turn it off. It's on the cloud. So the ability 10 years back, if somebody had to launch a product, one had to do a proper market research, then after that create a campaign, and then run the campaign, and after that you'll figure out whether the product is working or not. Even if you try to do a little bit of testing, the testing would be on a scale which could be afforded by a person. However, digital per se has changed that paradigm, and changed the paradigm for good. One is able to sample a lot better today with smaller A/B testing scenarios. So for a smaller business, I would say that testing that out is very crucial, and failing fast is very crucial. So it has never been more. We used to say in the old economy that failing fast is important, but failing fast with what cost was the biggest issue. Right now, failing fast as low cost as possible, and that's what digital economy gives us. So let's use it. So for all the budding entrepreneurs, I would say that is the most important thing one has to look at. If you have a business plan in order, you want to test out something, just test out things which are much more, I would say, conceptual, but targeted at different segments to figure out who's the right customer for you and the message is working or not. As you go towards a growth path, one has to understand that in the digital world, it's like a physical world only. It doesn't change much. The mistake that most of us do is that we try to treat both the different worlds in different light. So the buying behavior has changed, but it has changed both in the physical as well as in the digital world. Nothing changes per se. People like still to touch and feel. I remember a few years back there we had concepts around digital which came that okay, if the acquisition is happening offline, it's not a good acquisition. That was a time when the cost of acquisition was much lower. The paradigms of cost of acquisitions have changed. So people should not be shy of looking at omnichannel per se, because in a way omnichannel works out cheaper these days, wherein you have a physical presence for an online brand as well as an online digital presence for a brand. You are making the product available at every point. The buy or the purchase can happen at any one of these points. It's about the availability at all these points. And different individuals tend to have different buying behaviors when it comes to buying online. It can be online, or the person might just pay online and pick up from the store. So availability on these different points is very important.
Anybody has any questions?
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, I was just thinking that at least in the U.S. for TV, there was the standard channels. There was a limit on the number of advertisements, say per half hour, and it seems to me that we're getting overwhelmed now with advertisements, whether it be, sometimes I can't even find, where the ads end and what I'm looking for starts. Is there any regulation on that, or do you see that, or do you think that we're just going to get so overwhelmed that it's not going to be worth it for them to do that anymore?
It's already happening. What you're saying is absolutely right. That's the point I was making. That there is so much of digital noise out there. So, for example, I'll give you a simple exercise. Just go and search for women in STEM on Google. You're doing it right now on the green laptop. Can you just search for women in STEM on Google? And let me know how many search results come. Around 1 million?
Wow.
Yeah.
114 million.
So, there are 140 million pieces on women in STEM, and I thought that this was a niche topic. So, that's what it is. Now, as a good marketer, you'll try to be in the top 1 or 2 pages of being women on this subject. And as a general marketer, you'll be out there on one of the 140 million searches. So I guess finally it comes to skill, but the fact is that what you said is absolutely right. There's so much of clutter.
Okay, I have this question, and either of you can take it. So this is a little contrary. We are in Women and STEM conference, but from what you said, that with time, with the bots coming into the picture and artificial intelligence being more and more evolved, would you say that creativity still is in the domain of human? And if so, would you really be better off encouraging kids to hone their creative skills?
Absolutely. I think that fostering creativity at an early age is definitely crucial because, as we've been talking about, there is a fast evolving world that we're in right now in terms of technology, and it's very important for us to allow for creativity to be explored very early on, because if we wait till children are in high school and then they need to decide what they're going to go for college to study, for example, then you're missing on crucial years of technical development and creative development where children can actually overlap the two together. That's part of the work that I'm personally involved in terms of bringing design and technical education to schools around the States. And that's work that's been recognized at the White House. So there was definitely over the past decades an understatement and undervaluing of creativity because it's not something tangible. It's not something we can calculate. It's different than mathematics and other kinds of tangible data. So people never really understood its value because we cannot calculate it. What happened is that over the next generation of companies that emerged later, and they started to actually employ creative-centered and more leveraging the capacity that the creative side of our brain can actually produce into how we experience the world and into how we can grow businesses to 200% higher in revenues. If you look at companies like Apple and Procter & Gamble and many other companies that started to actually use design thinking as part of their strategy to implement for new products, their growth exceeded any other types of Fortune 500 companies that are still more brick and mortar and not really considering that part of the brain as valuable to what you could bring to business. So I hope that answers your question from education to business and
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. Yeah. So there was a 2x2 matrix which was published by World Economic Forum, I think around 6 months back, and which talked about the future jobs or the future skills. And I would say that the future skills were on 2 axes, and one of the axes was more analytical nature. So technology and analytics became very critical. The other axis was around creativity. So if you plot it like this was towards analytical and technical, this was moving towards creativity and design. But if you really look at what is the top of that quadrant, the top of the quadrant is a combination of both. So what you're looking at is basically somebody who has a design thinking. A design thinking, in my view, is a combination of core analytical brain with a good understanding of design. And that is a potent combination. The other combination which was very good and interesting to look at that graph was the combination between tech and sales. A great tech guy who understands business and is able to sell off his idea. So as we, again, I would hate to admit it, but I think women are much more suited for these two kind of quadrants in a way, especially the design plus design thinking kind of a quadrant. So you have all the skills which are on the analytical side, the left brain, right brain combination works, and on the same side, the appreciation for design is there. But yeah, the appreciation of design has to be less from a point of creativity and more from the point of functionality.
I think that the most functional products and services are the ones that balance both together. If we talk about functionality without the experience part, then we're back to the age way before when people became aware of UI and UX. And so it's definitely about hybridization and bringing the two together. And if you don't have the two sides of the brain that work at the same level, definitely the solution is to bring people that can have that. And I think that the most successful companies are the ones that were able to integrate within their teams the different kinds of skills in order to maximize the efficiency of.
And I'll tell you a small, I would say, instance that me and Rania are just outside when we were discussing. So there's something on her hand, and I said, this is an awesome one. So I asked her whether it's something like Fitbit, and she said, yeah, this is something which could be, for example, it's the opportunity.
Because
It looks lovely. It is just a factor of getting the right senses in. And that's what we're talking about, design plus creativity getting together.
Absolutely. Any other questions, please?
There's a new term that everybody seems to be using, and it's digitization as well as digitalization. Is there a difference between the two? And what's your definition?
These are difficult terms. Every now and then we will come with terms. I would give it a pass, actually, if you ask me. I will Google it up. That's a better way to do it. But I would say...
you want to Google it and tell us?
That is what is happening. Is the sense that the digital as a term has been widened to a lot of topics. And the topics are way beyond what are typically a gardener or a forester will tell you digital is. So digital for them is a combination of physical and I would say digital world. For them, that is what digital is. But the fact is that every consulting firm comes with their own few terms now and then. That's how everybody makes money. That's how we make money.
I heard the workers with John Chambers.
Yeah. So Cisco is, again, they have to sell finally.
Any other questions?
So lovely.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's so good.
Pleasure.
Thanks.